expert witnesses do not just come to court to deliver a particular conclusion, right? That's, although they do that, that's not the only reason that expert witnesses are called to testify. Expert witnesses are called to testify because they are recognized as having sufficient levels of expertise in a particular field or occupation or area of professional endeavor. The judge cannot predict all of the questions that the attorneys are going to ask. So when an expert witness is permitted to testify, they are tendered as an expert in a particular area. They are not tendered as an expert in the delivery of a specific conclusion. Okay, so again, I'm speaking generally here. So for that reason, it it is improper for a judge to micromanage the testimony of an expert witness or to try to pare down what the expert witness would testify to if asked a particular question. Now, where this comes into play is particularly with identifications, which has, when I first got into the field, this was not even a subject that anybody really cared about. It was just sort of it was the standard practice, right? So if I identify a bullet as having been fired from a particular gun, we'll use that example. Um, the the offense that people take to that is that they they view it as a statement of certainty, incorrectly so. And this is really important for those of us that function on the expert witnessing side. They will say that the identification is a terminal conclusion because it allows for no other discussion. In other words, when you identify a bullet as having been fired from a specific gun, what you are saying is that there is no other explanation for how that pattern of stochastic pattern of marks appeared on that bullet. The only way that that pattern could have gotten on that bullet is to have been fired from this gun. So people perceive it as being certainty. And you can hear people talk about this that criticize the use of the term identification. Okay. So what are you to do with that? Because there's a lot of you out there that identify patterns as having been made from a particular source, or you identify a source as having made a particular stochastic pattern. Could be friction ridges, cartridge case, bullets, handwriting, and whatever it may be. I am of the opinion that expert witnesses in the forensic laboratory sciences should reject being micromanaged. And I would encourage you and even urge you to stick with the reporting of identifications. And I want to tell you specifically why that is. So when the identification is an answer to a question, that's what forensic science is. It is a business of answering questions of investigative, legal, or judicial significance. If you conduct as a appropriately trained or qualified firearm and tool mark examiner, for example, and you go into court and you are asked the question of the attorney, Mr. Collins, were you able to identify the firearm that was submitted to you in this case as having fired the autopsy bullet? If I am asked that question, and based upon my professional experience and training and in alignment with my laboratory's procedures and my compliance with my accreditation standards and my quality assurance practices that are established in the lab. If it is my best professional judgment that I have identified the gun that fired the autopsy bullet, then it would be unethical for me to not state that when asked under oath. Period. This is one of the things that you come to learn when you specialize in the comparison of stochastic patterns is that you reach and then cross a threshold where you know that you have or actually I should rephrase that to be a little bit more scientifically fair. You reach such a high level of confidence with such minimal doubt that that gun fired the autopsy bullet, to use that example, that you have identified the gun for all practical purposes. And so to not say that or to not share that when asked would be inappropriate. So then the question becomes, well, then why do you put that in the report? Why is it in the report that you say, People's Exhibit 3 was identified as being fired from the firearm, People's Exhibit 12? Well, it's because in forensic science, we anticipate the questions that we're going to be asked. And if you're a firearm and tool mark examiner and you receive in the laboratory a bullet from the autopsy and you receive a suspect firearm, it's a pretty safe assumption that you're being asked to determine if you can identify that gun as having fired that bullet. Why else would they submit it? So I happen to be an individual, an experienced and I dare I say credentialed individual that believes that this push that exists under the radar to stop forensic scientists from reporting identifications, identifying the source of stochastic patterns is unethical.